Hello, everyone. Let's talk about something that we all face at some point: laziness. Maybe it's that moment when you hit the snooze button 5 times, or when you're on the couch scrolling endlessly. We've all been there. But here's the truth. Laziness isn't something you have to accept. It's not permanent. And most importantly, it's not the end of the world. You can break free from it. I'm going to show you how. Laziness isn't about being weak. It's about being stuck in a pattern. The good news, you can change it. Today, I'm going to share the steps you can take to break free from that comfortable yet unproductive place of inertia. Let's dive in. Laziness is something everyone experiences from time to time. It's easy to get stuck in a cycle where we don't feel like doing anything and allow ourselves to fall into the trap of inactivity. But here's the crucial point. Just because you're feeling lazy in the moment doesn't mean that's who you are. Feeling unmotivated or sluggish doesn't define your entire personality or potential. We often make the mistake of internalizing laziness. We start to believe, I'm just a lazy person, or I can never get anything done. But those thoughts aren't the truth. They're simply a temporary feeling, not your permanent identity. And when we label ourselves as lazy, we make it harder to break out of the cycle because we start to accept it as our reality. It's important to acknowledge that laziness is something we do occasionally, not something we are. By recognizing this distinction, we can start to disassociate from the feeling and avoid allowing it to paralyze us. In other words, it's not about shaming yourself for being lazy. It's about understanding that laziness is just a behavior that can change, just like any other habit. When you shift your perspective and realize that this is just a momentary phase, it becomes much easier to take action. Instead of getting stuck in a loop of self-criticism, acknowledge the laziness, accept that it happens, and then move forward. You don't have to let it control your actions or your day. The key to overcoming laziness is to stop thinking you need to tackle everything at once. When we're faced with a big task, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and put it off because it seems too massive or complicated to start. This is where the magic of starting small comes in. Instead of focusing on the entire goal, focus on just one tiny action you can take right now. For example, if you've been avoiding a big project, don't pressure yourself to finish it all in one sitting. Instead, tell yourself you'll just work on it for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. You'd be surprised how often, once you get started, you'll keep going. But even if you stop after that short burst, you've already made progress. That's the key. It's not about doing everything at once. It's about breaking down the task into a manageable piece. The act of starting is often the hardest part. When you commit to a tiny action, you're tricking your brain into thinking the task is less daunting, and the resistance to beginning melts away. The beauty of tiny actions is that they create momentum. Once you get going, you start to build energy and motivation. Over time, these small steps will add up to bigger results without the pressure of trying to do everything at once. Tiny actions also prevent you from feeling paralyzed by perfectionism. You don't need to do everything perfectly. You just need to start. The first step, no matter how small, is progress. And progress, however tiny, leads to greater action. So break down your goals into bite-sized pieces and get moving, even if it's just for a few minutes at a time. One of the biggest roadblocks to overcoming laziness is the story we tell ourselves about why we're not getting things done. Our minds are great at creating narratives, and often those narratives are filled with excuses that reinforce our inactivity. We might tell ourselves things like, I'm too tired, I'll never be good at this, or I don't have enough time. These stories become so familiar that we start to believe them as truth, even when they're not. The truth is, most of these stories are just that, stories. They're narratives we've created based on past experiences, our emotions, or even fear of failure. They aren't based on objective facts. For instance, you might think you're too tired to work, but in reality, you could just be feeling mentally overwhelmed or anxious, which is often mistaken for physical exhaustion. Once you challenge that story, you realize that your body is capable of more than you thought, and the real problem might be mental, not physical. By challenging the story you tell yourself, you start to create space for new, empowering beliefs. Instead of thinking, I'm too lazy to get started, try thinking, I can take one small step forward. Instead of, I'm not good enough to finish this, shift to, I can improve along the way and make progress. The moment you stop believing your negative self-talk and start questioning the stories that hold you back, you break the cycle of procrastination. It's important to recognize that these stories are often exaggerated or distorted. For example, you might tell yourself, I'll never finish this project. But in reality, you've probably completed many difficult tasks in the past. Your ability to push through challenges is already proven. It just gets hidden under layers of self-doubt. The best way to combat these stories is to call them out as soon as they appear. When you catch yourself thinking, I'm too tired, or I'll never get this done, ask yourself, is that really true? Or what's the evidence for that? More often than not, you'll find that the story you've been telling yourself is just a mental block keeping you stuck. By challenging it, you can rewrite your narrative and take action. We all have a narrative running in our heads, often without even realizing it. When we face tasks we're avoiding, when we feel unmotivated, or when we're struggling to get started, we tend to create stories that justify why we're not taking action. These stories become the excuses we lean on, the reasons we tell ourselves for staying stuck. I'm too tired to work. I'm not smart enough to do this. I'll never be able to finish this project. These thoughts may feel like the truth, but in reality, they're simply stories we've told ourselves so many times that we start to believe them. The problem with these stories is that they limit us. They box us into a belief system that convinces us we're incapable of doing what we know we need to do. We start identifying with them, believing that lazy is part of who we are, or that we'll always be too busy to get anything done. But here's the thing, these stories are not facts. They're just interpretations of reality, and often they're rooted in fear or self-doubt. Let's break it down. When you tell yourself, I'm too tired, what are you really saying? Often it's not about physical exhaustion. It's about feeling mentally drained, overwhelmed, or even fearful of the task at hand. When you challenge that story, you begin to realize it's less about being tired and more about the emotional resistance to getting started. Once you reframe that thought and ask, what would happen if I just worked for 10 minutes? You realize that taking small, manageable steps will actually make the task seem less overwhelming and can energize you rather than drain you. Similarly, when you tell yourself, I'll never be able to finish this, you're predicting failure before you've even started. That thought is rooted in self-doubt and fear of not measuring up. But think about it. Have you ever tackled something difficult and completed it? Of course you have. The ability to succeed is already inside you. What's holding you back is the story you're telling yourself about what you can or can't do. If you challenge that narrative and tell yourself, I've handled hard things before and I can figure this out too, you'll begin to approach the task with a much more empowered mindset. These stories aren't just negative, they can be exaggerated. I don't have time is one of the most common stories we tell ourselves. But in reality, everyone has pockets of time throughout the day. When you really break it down, you'll find time to squeeze in small actions. Even if you don't have an entire afternoon to devote to a project, you can still commit to 10 minutes of focused effort. When you challenge the belief that you don't have time, you'll realize that it's not about having all the time in the world. It's about using the time you do have effectively. The more you challenge these stories, the more you realize that your brain is simply looking for a reason to stay comfortable. It's looking for an excuse to avoid discomfort, to protect you from feeling overwhelmed or vulnerable. But that comfort zone is where nothing happens. Growth happens when you push against the stories that hold you back, even if it's just by starting with one small action. So when you catch yourself telling yourself these stories, don't accept them as truth. Stop and ask yourself, is this really accurate? Or what's the real reason I'm avoiding this? Often, the answers will reveal that the story you've been telling yourself is a defense mechanism, not a fact. Recognize it for what it is, and then take the first step to challenge it. The moment you shift the narrative, you begin to take control of your actions instead of letting these self-imposed limitations dictate your behavior. When you're stuck in a cycle of laziness or procrastination, one of the best ways to break free is to simply activate your body. We often underestimate how much physical movement can influence our mental state. The idea that you can think your way out of laziness might sound tempting, but sometimes the key to getting unstuck is to start moving. When you're physically active, it's like you're jump-starting your system. It shifts your focus and gets your energy flowing. Think about it. How many times have you sat at your desk or on the couch feeling drained and unable to focus, only to take a quick walk or stretch and immediately feel a little more clear-headed? That's because physical movement triggers the release of endorphins, which help elevate your mood and reduce stress. Even if you're not in the mood to work, just getting up and moving your body can help push through that initial resistance. It doesn't have to be a full-on workout to get the benefits. In fact, sometimes it's about finding small, simple movements that help shake off the inertia. Stand up and stretch. Walk around the block. Do a couple of jumping jacks. Even something as simple as standing up and moving around for 30 seconds can refresh your mind and body, helping you break through the mental fog that accompanies laziness. This isn't about turning your day into a workout session. It's about activating your body enough to disrupt the stagnation. The physical activity also helps your brain get into a state of readiness. When you move, you're telling your brain that it's time to focus, time to get to work. It's a signal to yourself that you're not going to sit in this lazy state any longer. Even if you don't have time for a long workout, the act of getting your body moving shifts your state of mind. Sometimes laziness isn't about being tired. It's about being mentally and emotionally drained. We get stuck in negative thought patterns, and it can be hard to break free. But movement helps reset your brain, making it easier to think clearly and find the energy you need to tackle whatever's in front of you. It's amazing how much power we have to shift our energy simply by activating our bodies. If you're struggling to overcome laziness, try this. Get up, take a quick walk, do some light stretches, or even dance around for a couple of minutes. You might be surprised at how much of a difference it makes. It's a powerful way to break the mental cycle of inertia and make space for the next step, whatever it may be. So, when you feel stuck, don't wait for motivation to strike. Move your body and watch how your energy and focus begin to shift. One of the most effective ways to beat laziness is to set a timer and commit to working for a short, defined period. This technique is simple yet incredibly powerful. It takes the pressure off of you by reducing a task to something that feels more manageable. Instead of thinking, I have so much to do and no time, you only need to focus on completing a task for the next 10, 15, or 30 minutes. That's it. No long hours stretching out in front of you, just a small, achievable block of time. The key here is to set a timer that feels realistic and non-intimidating. Maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's 20 minutes. The goal isn't to overburden yourself with an endless stretch of time. It's to create a commitment to a small action, a commitment that your mind can't easily back out of. Knowing there's an end in sight makes it easier to begin. You don't have to think about the whole task or the pressure of finishing. It's just about getting through that brief window of time. And here's the real magic. Once you get started, you'll often find that you want to keep going after the timer goes off. A lot of the resistance to tasks comes from the fear of starting or the overwhelming thought that you'll never finish. But when you break it down into a short, time-limited commitment, you trick your brain into thinking, this won't take long, and that's usually enough to get you in motion. Even if you don't feel like continuing once the timer rings, you've already made progress. The act of working, even for a few minutes, creates momentum. It shows your brain that you are capable of action, and that small action often leads to more. It's like the snowball effect. The more you work, the more you want to work. Another benefit of setting a timer is that it helps eliminate distractions. When you know you have a limited amount of time to focus, you're more likely to put away your phone, close unnecessary tabs on your computer, and give your full attention to the task at hand. The timer becomes a tool that not only structures your time, but also focuses your energy. Timers also help create a sense of urgency. It's easy to let tasks drag on indefinitely when there's no real sense of time attached. But when the clock is ticking, you're more likely to work with a sense of purpose and speed. It becomes less about perfection and more about progress, and that shift in mindset helps you get things done faster and more efficiently. Even on days when you're feeling particularly lazy or unmotivated, setting a timer allows you to commit to small periods of effort that won't overwhelm you. However, and that's the point, breaking down the inertia into something that's easy to start and finish, no matter how big or small the task is. You can build consistency over time, one timer at a time, and create habits that help you power through laziness. So the next time you're faced with a task you're avoiding, grab your phone or a kitchen timer, set it for 10 or 20 minutes, and focus all your energy on the task for that short burst. The worst thing that can happen is you make progress, and the best thing, you may find that you've gotten more done than you ever expected. So as we wrap up today, remember that overcoming laziness isn't about transforming everything at once or waiting for motivation to magically appear. It's about taking small, deliberate actions, challenging the stories we tell ourselves, moving our bodies, setting timers, and celebrating every win along the way. The key to breaking free from laziness isn't perfection, it's progress. Every tiny step you take brings you closer to where you want to be. And when you begin to recognize and celebrate those steps, no matter how small, you'll find that the inertia starts to lift. You'll start building momentum. And with that momentum, you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish. So, get out there and start moving. Don't wait for motivation to strike. Don't let the laziness define you, and don't underestimate the power of the little actions. You've got everything you need to make progress, and the best time to start is right now. Let's get to work, one small step at a time. Thank you.